Hello and welcome to English Digest. I'm Seb.
And I'm Elsie.
In today's graph writing lesson, we're going to be looking at the causes of stress faced by high school students at Greenwood High School. Let's take a closer look. The pie chart below shows the main causes of stress experienced by the 12th graders at Greenwood High School. Please read this graph carefully and write an article with more than 120 words that analyzes the content of the graph. In the first paragraph, describe the graph in detail. In the second paragraph, talk about the main causes of stress in your life and what you usually do to relieve stress.
下方圆饼图呈现的是翠华高中 Greenwood High School 辅导室对该校高三生所进行的主要压力来源调查结果，请你依据图表内容撰写一篇英文作文，文长一样哦，至少120个单词，文章至少分为2个段落，第一个段落描述图表的内容，第二段则是描述你最大的压力来源为何，而当你面对压力的时候，又是如何疏解的呢
So as we said, today's assignment focuses on on causes of stress for high school students at Greenwood. We're talking about what makes them stressed. Let's shoot a few ideas first. What things might make high school students stressed?
Their homework, their studies, and maybe their relationships with their teachers and classmates.
Those are all possible causes of stress. We could also talk about long school hours as well. You'll remember last month or a month before, we talked about long school hours in Taiwan schools and the problems that was causing. So we could also say that might cause them stress if they're not getting enough time to rest. So that would be another example. All right, so let's take a closer look at the different causes that are shown in the graph.
OK, 所以当我们看到这个 graph 这个图表的时候呢，你会看到上面的标题这个 title 翠华高中高三学生主要的压力来源。然后呢，你会发现这个圆饼图有几个部分呢 ？1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 parts.
Exactly, yes. It's divided into 6 parts. They're not the same size, so we'll get onto that in a little bit. That means that the causes, not everybody thinks the causes of stress are the same. But we've got these 6 different labels, don't we? The biggest one seems to be about grades, doesn't it? Concerns about grades.
Their academic performance. 49%.
Their academic performance.
And then it's appearance. 16%.
Right, so their physical appearance, what they look like. Do they have insecurities about the way they look or the shape of their body? Those would be under 身材外貌. We also had 感情. What's 感情 again?
Relationships. Right, their feelings. 所以这个是 15%, 15%. 再来是 their relationships with parents.
Oh, that's always a difficult one when you're in high school, right? Did you have a difficult relationship with your parents in high school?
I think I did. We fought a lot.
Right, there's a lot of fighting. I think it's because we're learning to be adults, and so our parents have expectations and we're working out what we want for ourselves, and so sometimes we can have arguments at that time in life.
Right.
There was also future plans as well, 未来计划. So
8%.
That's 8%, exactly. So future plans, that could be like what college you're going to, what job you're going to have, what you're going to do when you graduate. And lastly, we have this tiny one, other, right?
其他有
Yes,
2%.
we could also say miscellaneous as well. Just other things that don't fit into this category. All right, let's move on now to the develop approach section of this writing assignment. So how are we going to write a really good passage about this pie chart?
OK, 本篇呢，它是一个图表写作。那图表写作所呈现的是统计数字 statistics， 事实 facts， 数据分布情形 distributions， 还有就是调查或报告的说明 explanations。常见的步骤为第一个。分析图表，也就是我们今天文章我们做的在第一段我们必须要分析图表，确实描述图表所传递的讯息。第二个 解读图表的内容，描述图表中呢具有意义而且值得描述的数值，或是比较其相对的关系。再来第三个呢是根据图表的内容，适时加入自己的看法、推论或是实际的例证来呼应主题。所以要注意哦，在你分析图表的时候，你先不要加入自己主观的想法，最后再加进去就可以了。
Exactly. So our writing is going to be achieving 3 main goals: describing, interpreting, and reflecting. So when we describe, we are talking about what we can see in the chart, in this pie chart. So it's a very important part of the introduction, as we want to make sure that all our readers understand what we're talking about. So for this, we could, for example, say we're looking at a pie chart. You know, that's the kind of graphic we're looking at. It's not a bar chart. It's not a line chart. We've got a big circle with sections. So this is a pie chart. We could also say that it's talking about the different causes of stress for students at Greenwood High. Those are things, descriptive things, we can say about this picture. So if someone is not looking at a picture of the pie chart, then they would still understand what we're writing about. Next, we have interpreting. So when we interpret, we explain what the chart means. And so we're going into a little bit more detail here. So for example, we can see from the graph that that lots of students are worried about their grades. So we could say grades are the main cause of concern among students. That's one interpretation we can make about the pie chart. So why do we say that? That's because the blue segment of the chart is the biggest, and we're interpreting that and explaining it to the reader. Lastly, we have reflecting. So for the first 2 sections, you are focusing on what you can see in the graph and making sense of that. When you reflect, you take things further and offer your own opinions, experiences, stories. You know, you add more depth to the chart that you're writing about. So for this assignment, you could perhaps compare your experiences with stress with how stress is represented in the graph. How are you worried about your grades? What are the main concerns that you have in high school? What is concerning to you? Those are all things that you could ask in the last part of your passage.
再来呢，第二个我们要注意的是如同一般文章的起承转合，图表写作的内容呢，必须完全符合图表中的资讯哦。首先，你要清楚的理解本图表的主题是什么。所以呢，我们这边的主题是翠华高中高3学生主要压力来源，这个部分是非常重要的。还有就是图表中的统计数字或是符号分别代表什么。所以我们刚刚呢，我跟 Seb 已经一一的跟大家说明它这个图表的内容了。那有没有哪一项是最突出的呢？你就要特别点出来哦。那依提示说明，第一段它是要提出各项分别为何，需要客观的分析图表显示的资讯，避免加入过多的个人观点。第二段你才加进去个人的经验，把它融入你的写作，描述自己压力来源跟疏解的方式。
Great points there. But I'm curious, how were your high school experiences with stress compared to those in the chart?
So for me, I was very worried about my grades, just like the students in this high school. But I was more stressed by my future plan than my appearance. What about you?
I think when I was in high school, I was stressed about my grades, like a lot of students were. But I was also stressed about relationships as well, both romantic relationships and friendships. I think when you're a teenager, it can be very confusing working out what kind of person you are. And so, yes, you can struggle a lot there and feel very stressed when you don't know what to do.
And there might be peer pressure.
Exactly. And there might also be peer pressure. Peer pressure is basically when you feel pressured or forced to behave in a certain way, either because your peers, your classmates, or your friends are telling you to do it, or because everybody is doing that and you want to be part of the group. So peer pressure can make you very stressed as well.
对呀，所以同侪压力也是会是主要的压力来源之一哦。那再来呢，第三个，除了内容要流畅完整之外呢，文法结构、组织、字词的搭配、修辞等技巧的自然运用也都很重要。要求能够正确使用字句来描述数值的变化，再去尝试运用不同的单字来表达，增加文章的深度。再来呢，不要去挑选很艰难的字汇，好，我们先去用一些自己可以正确掌握的单字或者是句子。好，再来呢，如果能够正确把握那一些句子，那我们再去修改，看看有没有更漂亮的字可以用上去，这样就可以了。
Right. Try to use clear structures when you're writing. Keep things in the active voice, I ate the sandwich, not the sandwich was eaten, and this will make your writing easier to read. Personally, I think that when you write the first passage, it's better to use simple language. Once you finish, you can review your work and look for ways to make it more impactful. So, for example, students often have too much homework and can't handle it. We could change this into students are often overwhelmed by substantial homework assignments. Okay, so we've got overwhelmed and substantial, two much more powerful words that tell us a lot more than the words in our first sentence. All right, let's move on to brainstorming. So we understand how we're going to write about this, but let's start to think of some of the ideas that we can include in our own graph writing. So today's brainstorming is going to be a bit different because we already know the different causes of stress Greenwood kids are facing. We're not imagining new causes. Instead, we need to brainstorm different ways that we can spice up our description and interpretation of the data. As mentioned, we're going to start our passage by explaining what we can see. This chart shows the main causes of stress of high school students. Now, that sentence is fine, but it's not very exciting. We could make it much more interesting by using a different verb. What words could we use instead of shows, Elsie?
OK， 所以当我们要表示图表显示的时候，当然 shows 是一个最简单而且是正确的字。那还有什么可以去替换它呢？ For example， 我们可以说 the pie chart displays， 或者是 points out， 或是 describes， 或者是 indicates， 加上 that， 再加上主词和动词。或者是呢，我们也可以说 the pie chart accounts for something。好，也可以代表这个 pie chart 这个圆饼图它代表了什么样的意义，好，它说明了什么样的内容。再来就是呢，我们可以用 according to or based on the pie chart 来当作句首来开头。
Exactly. Moving on, we also need to talk about the different causes of stress. So we need to review some words for talking about numbers and statistics, 统计。So what words are these? Well, we could talk about fractions. So, for example, a quarter, a half, 2/3, 3/4. And we can use these to talk about the different sections of the pie chart. Now, using fraction words is going to be very useful if you have any clean segments in your pie chart, like 25%, 50%, 33%, those ones you could say a quarter, a half, or a third, respectively. If the number is slightly out, you could say, roughly a third, or about half, to show the reader that it's not exactly 50%, it's not exactly 33%, but it's close to that number. And that makes it very easy for your readers to understand what you're saying, for them to have a good idea of just how many students feel a certain way. Another way we could talk about the segments in the pie chart are using percentages. And I think this is probably the most straightforward way of doing it. When we talk about percentages, we're obviously just going to say the number and percent. So 50%, 28%, 93%, whatever. And this will give us the readers a clear way to connect your writing with the chart as well. They can look at that number, they can look at the chart, and they can say, oh, I see what he's talking about. We could also talk about, we could represent the fractions in a more creative way, and that's by using the one in so many structure. So 1 in 6 students are worried about feelings, for example. 1 in 6 would be about 15%, right? About 15% of students feel a certain way. And the readers might not have a good understanding of what 15% means. But if you say 1 in 6 people, they can imagine a group of people. They can imagine how many people in that group would feel a certain way, how prevalent that opinion would be. Now, we can see that there's not actually there is 15% for Ganqing, but let's say if you're going to write about appearance, physical appearance, that's not exactly 1 in 6 people. And so we could use an adverb like about, around, nearly, or approximately to show that it's not exactly 1 in 6, it's just close to 1 in 6 people.
没错，所以呢，适当的用分数 fractions 来表示这个圆饼图里面的分布也是很重要的哦。
Exactly. And lastly, we can use vaguer phrases like a large or small portion of people or a percentage of people, which give us less information, but they could be very useful at the beginning when you're trying to just make a quick statement to orient your reader and give them a direction to go from. Okay, let's go on to the outline section and think about how we can organize our thoughts into a great writing passage. So for today's outline, we're going to use the first paragraph to describe and interpret the chart. In the second, we'll reflect on the data and talk about our experiences. Let's look at the example.
好，所以第一段的主题句呢，我们要看到的是 The pie chart shows the causes of stress for 12th graders at Greenwood High School. 主题句写完之后呢，接着分别叙述圆饼图的细节。好，这个是题目要我们做到的。所以 A, 49% of students said tests and grades caused the most stress. B, physical appearance caused stress for 16% of students. 再来 C, 15% of students were stressed by romance. D, 10% were stressed by their relationships with parents. 8% worried about their future, and 2% reported other causes. 所以分别叙述出来，然后你会发现这边的作者他选用的是用 percentage， 也就是圆饼图上面呈现的这些百分比来叙述。
Exactly. So if we go on to the second paragraph, we see that the writer goes on to reflect and talk about their own experiences, how their experiences might be similar or different. The second paragraph begins, I'm a 12th grade student and I can relate to the information in this chart. So the topic sentence makes it immediately clear how the writer feels about the data. They say that, stress, the subject of this article, is something which I have personal experiences about. And I totally agree with, or I can sympathize with the students in this study. And we can tell that he sympathizes because he says, I can relate to. And that means my experience is similar. So when we say relate to, we know that they're going to talk about the experiences, the similarities between their own experience and the data. So how do they follow this up? Well, they say, my relationship with my parents causes the most stress for me, and I'm always fighting with them. What's good about telling this story is it gives the reader an idea of why students' relationships with their parents might be stressing them out. It's not that they have horrible parents, it's that there is some kind of conflict. That's what we can learn from this part. And the same can be said about the conclusion. My friends always support me, and spending time with them after school helps me relax. So we get the sense here that talking about problems with friends and hanging out helps the writer to feel less stressed. In a sense, it's advice for the reader. All right, shall we take a quick break here and then we can come back and look at the basic sample for our graph writing exercise. Okay, basic sample. The pie chart in this graphic shows the causes of stress for 12th graders at Greenwood High School. According to the chart, the biggest source of stress was tests and grades at 49%. Physical appearance was the next category, causing stress for 16% of students. A similar 15% of students were stressed by romance, while 10% were stressed by their relationships with parents. Fewer students, 8%, worried about their future, and the final 2% of students reported stress from other sources. As a 12th grade student, I relate to the information in this chart. However, while students at Greenwood High School are most stressed by schoolwork, I think my relationship with my parents accounts for most of my stress. For example, I'm always fighting with them. However, my friends help me feel supported. I spend a lot of time with them outside of school and find that it helps me relax. Okay, so there's a lot of good things here. As usual, our basic sample is very clear and very useful. I want to talk about the way that they structure their ideas. So in our outline, we looked at all of these different things. I have problems with my parents, my friends keep me supported, and then all of these different points about the pie chart. 49% of students said tests cause them stress, all of that. So they organize this very well using different adverbs which help the reader move through the paragraph. So if we look at the middle of the first paragraph, it begins according to the chart. So we know we're going to be talking about the data now. The following sentence, after saying a couple of the statistics, the following sentence says a similar 15%. So that's connecting that sentence to the previous one. We know that 16% of students are stressed about their physical appearance, and 15% are stressed by romance. So that's a similar number. And using a similar, that phrase is helping us connect the paragraph. We could, for the last sentence, we could actually use the adverb lastly. Lastly, fewer students worried about their future. So that would mean that that's the last statistic that we're giving, and it helps the reader know that they're coming to the end of this part of the reading. Okay, what did you notice about the basic sample, Elsie?
Actually, I like how the writer connects different categories too. So like you said, like you mentioned, 一开始这个作者用 the biggest source of stress 带出最大的那个部分 49% 的在校成绩。再来 and then he used the next category. And then similar is the important word here. Similar 代表相似，所以他用 similar 来带出相似的比例，也就是 a similar 15% of students. 再来呢，他用 while 子句接出下一个学生的比例。最后他用 the final 2% of students 带出最后一个项目。所以呢，他在连接出每个项目的用字上都使用了不太一样的内容。那最后呢，他还说到一个 as a 12th grade student, I relate to the information in this chart. 他用这一句带出他能够跟这个图表产生共鸣。relate to 这个片语呢，代表的就是和点点点产生共鸣的意思。
Exactly. All right, let's move on now to the advanced sample. Advanced sample. We are presented with a pie chart regarding the causes of stress among 12th graders at Greenwood High School. The chart comprises 6 segments, each of which is a common source of stress for high school students. Nearly half of all students cited academic performance as something that worried them, making it the most common stressor by far. In fact, it's over 3 times the number of students who reported being insecure about their physical appearance, 16%. A quarter of students are stressed by their relationships, whether with their parents, 10%, or with romantic interests, 15%. Finally, only 8% of students reported anxieties about the future as their primary stressor, followed by the 2% of students who reported other sources of stress as their most pressing concerns. When looking at this chart, I find myself in the minority. In contrast to the 49% of 12th graders at Greenwood who worry about high school academics, I'm kept up at night by thoughts related to my future. Where will I go to university? What should I study? Should I even attend a university? What is it that I want to accomplish? It's enough to make anyone's head spin. But I have a trick for dealing with it. I knit when I get worried or stressed, and not only does it calm me down, but it leaves me with a scarf, socks, or a hat by the end. It doesn't solve my problems, but it puts me in the right frame of mind to approach them from a different perspective. Okay, so I really, really like this one. I think the thing that I like the most about it is the fact that it gives a little bit of advice, a possible solution at the end, doesn't it?
Right.
This person goes on to say, I really like knitting. That's how I deal with my stress.
Yeah, so the writer spends more time writing about the questions he has in mind. And at the end of the essay, he tells us how he calms himself down.
Yes, exactly. We have a lot more information about how what might be making the writer stressed, the specific details of the writer's stress. And that helps us empathize with the writer. It helps us understand. And it might also make us feel comforted as well, because we might have similar experiences. We might be asking these same questions ourselves. Was there any vocabulary that stood out to you, Elsie?
I like he used, we are presented with the pie chart regarding. Regarding 这个和点点相关，好，与其说 about 或是别的字，用 regarding 用得很漂亮。再来就是 pressing concerns。Pressing 这个形容词代表迫切的，所以他说有2%的学生认为其他的压力才是迫切的问题。还有一个就是 make anyone's head spin， 代表让人头晕。
Exactly. So, there's a couple of really good ones. I think that the last one I would want to add in is frame of mind. It's at the very end. Puts me in the right frame of mind to approach them from a different perspective. Now, a frame of mind is a mental state or condition for thinking about something. So when someone has the right frame of mind for thinking about something, they're thinking about it in the right way. So, for example, if you're writing a university application and you see writing this application as a very important step that you're making towards your academic future, then you've got the right frame of mind. If you see it as a big joke that doesn't need a lot of effort, then you don't have the right frame of mind to produce a good application. So that is the last bit of vocab I think you guys should definitely have noted down in your heads. Make a mental note of that. And we will see you again soon for more writing and translation episodes. For English Digest, I'm Seb.
I'm Elsie.
And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.